So some leaders have insight amongst their other leadership qualities and personal qualities. Um, Amongst the insights I happen to have were an advanced understanding and commentary on uh, really a sequence of events, the rocketing prices of global oil, um, the collapse of debt-based industries and finance-based industries, primarily real estate, but also the auto industry and the auto sales have dropped quite a bit in the last few years, as many banks and lenders have been challenged to stay in business. Um, a surge of bankruptcies, a surge of activity in bankruptcy courts and collection activities, and certain kinds of specialties within the legal field have been really, really increasing in prominence. You had the baby boom retiring, that generation of people retiring, easy to predict, yet and easy to identify some of the implications. Yet many people express surprise when those things happen. Oh my gosh, all those people retired at age 65? What a shock. No, not a shock. Oh, when they retired, then their income drops, so their credit worthiness drops, so their borrowing drops, and they started to pull money out of their pensions and money markets and 401ks instead of putting money in. So they started selling stocks, and then they started buying bonds more. What a shock. No, not a shock at all. As far as oil, um, not a shock. None of these things. We talk about oil shock, price shock, yes, all that. But none of the developments were surprising. What has happened with currencies and with debt, and with the retiring of the baby boom, and with the countries that are especially dependent on cheap oil, and the communities like suburban communities, those places in the industrialized world in particular, and in the U.S. in particular, that are most dependent on uh, fossil fuels, especially oil, well, those are the places that have had some really rough years. The desert oases of Las Vegas and Phoenix have been amongst the first places to suffer real estate declines and the severest. And previous to the shift in trend, they were the ones who had the most growth because of the cheap oil, because oil had been so inexpensive, and people could go so far into the suburban development. It was a favorable place to build. There was immense, whole stack of political redistributions of wealth away from everything else towards um, new construction. So I could comment on a few other things, but basically the United States accumulating a huge amount of wealth from selling oil for many decades of the early 20th century, then used that wealth to buy things from other places. So manufacturing and agriculture, but particularly manufacturing, that had been happening in the U.S. was, uh, you could say, sent elsewhere instead of continue to utilize the plants in the U.S. New plants were built in other places. Oil was cheap, so we could transport goods very cheaply, and the American public chose to buy items at mega stores rather than small family businesses. They would buy things not so much from the small family farmers as from the huge industrial agriculture providers. Um, and we chose to um, invest our consumer dollars and our consumer spending in Chinese goods and Mexican imports and European imports in some cases, like BMW and Mercedes-Benz and so forth. we chose to invest in places other than the U.S., or in items manufactured other than in the U.S., or in distant parts of the U.S. rather than nearby us. So we chose to do that. We are the ones who went into tremendous debt, and we did that with, of course, the partnership of people who were willing to lend to us. When I say us, I mean me individually, probably you, your companies you've worked for. The governments have borrowed immense amounts of money from the state governments, local governments, the federal government, U.S. Treasury, and all. So we've done it. It's easy to see what will become of the places. It was easy and continues to be easy to see what will become of the places and the people who've invested in cheap oil as oil production diminishes worldwide. It was easy to predict the diminishing of global oil production. I haven't said much about that in this segment, but these segments. But as cycles go, there was the discovery of, let's say, oil. Let's say actually coal. I meant to say coal, of the fossil fuel coal. So the use of coal was discovered, and then people started to look for oil deposits, and they found more and more oil deposits. Then after a certain amount of time, they weren't finding as many oil deposits as they previously had. Soon, they basically had found all the, I keep saying oil, they found all the whatever kind of fossil fuel, natural gas, coal, oil. They discover it, they start to look for it, they being us. We find more and more of it, then we don't find as much of it because we found most of it already, so we aren't finding as much. We're producing more and more and more, and then all of a sudden we're not producing as, the pace of increasing production slows down, then it flattens, then it turns down. Now we're producing in a particular locality or worldwide, all the humans combined, we're producing or extracting less coal, less natural gas, less oil, and then we're still using it faster and faster. Well, eventually we don't use it as fast. We have to slow down our use of it because there's just less of it. And with that kind of development, the economies of certain places really dependent on fossil fuels is going to be interrupted. And either those places will be extremely motivated to innovate and will innovate and recover, or they will not recover from the depletion of fossil fuels. There's a lot of layers of all these things, but I'm just giving you a couple points of insight and a couple points of personal background. And for those of you who are interested in combining resources, whether that's material resources or social resources of who you know and connections, or resources of intellectual clarity and perceptiveness, I invite you to let me know. I do offer certain services related to finances, and I've consulted with people about health and what particularly happened in my case, and lots of conversations that are possible. But basically, those of us who are willing to recognize that there is unsustainability, or say destabilizing going on within certain systems in our midst, certain patterns of behavior have reached their peak, and other patterns of behavior may be relevant now and in the future. So that is an exploration in conversation and in relationship and in participation and exploration in humor, in leadership. I know I said an exploration and exploration. That was cool. You can quote me on that. So I am interested in sharing in effective adjustment and adaptation. That's really what insight is about, is seeing what's adaptive. I could have said that earlier and saved a lot of time, huh? But now you get it in a way that you might not have before, how it actually specifically relates to things like depletion fossil fuels. We have innovation to be done. We have conservation efforts to be done. The biggest issue really with the fossil fuel depletion is human populations. It will greatly decrease human populations if we do not replace fossil fuels. If we do not replace some other energy source, like nuclear energy or something, to accommodate for our diminishing access to fossil fuels. So, there's new things to be done in terms of health. Some of them might be very, very old, but new to us. There's new things to be done in terms of agriculture, in terms of how we interact with other people.